You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, August the 14th. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, a TV presenter suffered a panic attack live on air and everyone's so very grateful. Also, why gambling companies are on every footy jersey and Gina Rinehart is sitting poolside in Paris, who funds sport and why does it matter? And ditching scrolling, sex, wine, shopping. What's a dopamine detox and could you survive one? But first, Mia Freedman.
In case you missed it, baby name regret is real, and it's estimated that around 10% of parents don't like the name that they chose for their child, as opposed to the percentage of people who don't like the name that celebrities choose for their children, which is probably much higher. This week, Kylie Jenner has given an interview to British Vogue where she explains the turmoil that she experienced when she named her second child, a son called Air, spelled A-I-R-E, but who used to be called Knight, spelled K-N-I-G-T. She said, "My son's name was actually Knight for a long time, and my daughter still to this day is like, do you remember when Air's name was Knight?" And I'm like, no. And she's like, "That was so funny, Mum. I like Knight better." And I'm like, you know what? We're not doing this again. And she went on, that actually is funny. She went on to say that she really struggled to name her son and she was hysterically crying on the phone to her mother, Chris, spelled K-R-I-S, on the phone. And she said to her, Chris, with a K, "I can't figure out his name. Now my advice to all my friends having children is pick the name before because when the hormones hit, you can't make decisions. You can't," she cries. "When I met him, he was just the most beautiful thing to me and I couldn't believe just how perfect he was. I felt like such a failure that I couldn't name him. He deserved so much more than that. It just really triggered me."
I don't often say that Kylie Jenner is relatable. I found this incredibly
Very relatable.
I think she's spot on. The idea that you go through something like giving birth and then you're expected to make a rational, logical, administrative decision.
With respect, you have 9 months.
Yes, but a lot of people, we were the same. We kind of went, "Oh, we'll meet her. We'll meet them.
I
and
only
then
did
we'll
that with my
know.
last
When
one.
we look at her, we'll know." And I had no feelings either way. You're often incredibly sleep deprived. Luca was very committed to Luna. I ended up saying yes. I had no feelings at the time. The name, it's like, she just is Luna. I think we probably give too much stock to a name.
We do.
But I don't feel strongly either. I just had no capacity to make a decision, which is what she's
So you don't have regret?
No, I don't have regret.
Do you want to know the breakdown of why people have regret?
Yes.
Of the people who regret it, 25% say it's because the name is too common. 20, do you know Luna's, I think, number one or two most common names? 21% of name regretters say that it just doesn't feel right. And 20% say that I never liked it, I was pressured into using it.
Yep.
11% say it causes problems with spelling or pronunciation, like Air with an E. And 11% say it just doesn't suit my kid.
I think we both did, Mia, work with someone who changed their baby's name after like a year.
Yeah.
And it's more common than you think. And the thing is just like everything about parenting, when you do that, case in point, Kylie Jenner, a lot of people have a lot of feelings about it.
They get really angry.
Why do they get so angry about that?
Sophie Keisha changed her daughter's name. I don't know why people care. People care deeply.
I think there's probably a threshold. What do we think it is? Like 8? When can you not change your name anymore?
The thing is that
my daughter still wants to change hers.
One of the little triggers of why it probably irritates people is because it feels very vain. Like, I'm not saying that it is, but I can see why it does, because you know how you just said Luna just is Luna and you don't really think about it. I think that's how most people feel about their kids' names, is they're like, we liked it at the time. We didn't really realise that we liked it because we're part of a culture where everybody likes it too. Hence Luna, hence the fact that Matilda is usually in a sporting team with like 5 other Matildas because of that particular moment was the name and we thought we were being different. And I think most of us go, you suck it up and you deal with it. But if you've got the balls, or the female version of balls, to go, no, I don't like it, I'm going to change it, it feels indulgent.
I think that's the Manchester view.
I respect it.
My view is why it makes people upset is because it's suddenly like, is that something that we can do? Is that something we're doing now? Because then it hadn't occurred to me that I could change my child's name, and now I've got the mental load of thinking maybe I got it wrong.
True.
I like the idea of you've made a decision, okay, next.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's like, well, you could change it if you wanted to, too many choices.
Or you could just give them the nickname. Like, he's called Knight, but we call him Air. Why? I don't care. It's family. We just do.
Yeah, no one knows the birth certificate. My uncle was tasked with the job of writing down the kid's name. Like, the wife's just given birth. Can you go and do the forms? He filled out the forms wrong. Middle and first name the wrong way around. It's really, they're still pissed about it.
It's hard when you're tired and you've got to fill out forms.
Yeah.
A man is halfway through doing his very public job when he has to put his hand up and say, I'm sorry, I can't keep going. I need a minute. Nate Byrne, the very popular weather reporter on ABC Breakfast, did exactly this in front of thousands of viewers on Tuesday morning and instantly became a viral video. Here's the audio of what happened.
We've got big falls right through that part of the country, and we're going to see lots more rain in the days ahead. I'm actually going to need to stop for a second. Some of you may know that I occasionally get affected by some panic attacks, and actually that's happening right now. Lisa, maybe I could hand back to you.
You certainly can, Nate.
Nate's co-workers, including Lisa Miller, who you heard there on that grab, immediately jumped in, finished the weather for Nate and explained what was happening, reassuring viewers that he was fine.
That was so hard to listen to.
Oh, so hard to listen to.
Like, you can hear it start. You can hear him swallow, try to get it together, and you can hear his voice wobble, and you can hear him make that snap decision of, I actually can't keep going, because he tries to keep going and then he can't. And then to have the fortitude to be able to do a throw.
I can't believe
back
he was
to his
able
co-host.
to articulate that. I'm so impressed.
Very, very impressive.
It was immediately hailed as the textbook way to handle a co-worker's mental health incident with sensitivity and grace by his colleagues. And then Nate himself came back on the show a little bit later to talk about it, as he'd done in an article for the ABC 2 years ago after it happened before. And he reassured the audience that he was fine.
Very pleased to say that our wonderful colleague Nate is back with us.
Hey, sorry if I gave anybody a bit of a scare there.
Yes, not really, because you've been very honest before about getting panic attacks on air, and it's so great for people to know that it can happen to anyone.
You gave me a scare because I thought I'd have to finish doing the weather report, and I'm no good at that.
Well, he was talking about Queensland, so I was going to step up.
Well, and today would be the day to do it because there is so much going on for Queensland. But thank you all so much for helping out.
Here's a little bit of what he wrote in that story where he first explained his panic attacks. He said, I had my first ever panic attack on live TV. I was standing in one of my favourite places doing the thing I love most. He went on to say anxiety had never been an issue in my life before, even though high-stress situations weren't a stranger. But this time I wasn't a naval officer moments away from running a warship aground or standing in front of a stadium filled with 12,000 people hosting my first internationally televised event. I thought that my career was over. Something was taking control of me without my permission or understanding, and it was preventing me from doing what made me me. I was stood down for the rest of the day. News Breakfast co-host Madeline Morris very tactfully told the audience that the weatherman is under the weather, and I gathered my things and went straight to the doctor. Now, Nate's not alone. This week, both Carrie Bickmore, radio host, TV presenter, cancer charity advocate, all-round legend, said that she had also suffered while doing her job. She said this on radio this week, and she played a little bit of audio of herself reading the news while suffering anxiety before then she jumps in and talks about it.
And the fate of the English Siamese twins have been decided. A London court's ruled they can undergo surgery to separate them. Doctors are expected to wait a month, though. We have speed cameras on Marmion Ave, Sorrento, South West Highway, Armidale, Great Eastern Highway, Greenmount, Tonkin Highway, Morley, Ennis Ave, Rockingham and Orrong Road, Belmont.
You can turn it down now. We don't need to know how the traffic's going back 20 years ago, but I still look back and think, how did I do that? Because I was so consumed by this anxiety, and I didn't tell my family and friends about it because I think it felt quite significant in the scheme of some of the stuff that was happening in my life at the time. But I remember I would have them all afternoon when I was reading the news on Nova, and then all morning when I joined Hughesy and Kate all those years ago. And I only told Kate Langbrook about it the other day, and she was like, what are you talking about? I think I managed to get through that whole time without, I just imagine people are having meetings in rooms going, what's wrong with her? Why does she sound like that? And why does she do that? She had no idea. I think it's interesting, her first comment, which was, why didn't you tell me? And I think that's the thing. I just wish I'd spoken to people about it back then, because she wouldn't have cared. She would have done nothing but helped me out.
Carrie said that she was on the verge of a panic attack pretty much every single time she went on air in any capacity on TV and radio for a good decade.
Wow.
Jackie O also backed up this morning saying she'd had panic attacks for 18 months after a negative drug experience. I want to understand something about this, right? Because this has obviously struck such a chord when Nate in particular has been so open about what he was going through, and there's something about seeing it with your own eyes. Is it possible, do you think, to avoid putting yourself in circumstances that would make you this anxious if you suffer from anxiety? Because put in the most base terms, and I want to be really careful not to sound dismissive or insensitive about it, but in a world where we're constantly urged to push yourself out of your comfort zone and do something every day that scares you and all those things, is there a way in which, like, if something about your job makes you hyper anxious, it might not be the right job for you?
So what you're articulating, Holly, and I know that you're sort of being devil's advocate, is actually something that comes up in a lot of comment sections. So particularly the first time that Nate Byrne came out with his story, a lot of the comments were like, why are you a weatherman? Why are you on live television? And I actually put it to some outlouders. We have a lot of outlouders who are practicing psychologists. And I said, and I had a hunch because I've seen psychologists and studied it at uni for a bit, but I just wanted their expertise. You know, you hear Kate Campbell talk about swimming and the stress that causes her.
Or like singers who are vomiting before they go on stage from nerves.
And the psychologist said a few interesting things. They said often the panic attack isn't as related to the situation you're in as you might think. So it isn't the live television, it isn't reading the weather that's causing the panic attack necessarily. And people who experience panic attacks will testify to this, that they can happen when, I mean, I've had them when I've sat down to write or I've been totally by myself, and people who don't work in live television also have panic attacks all the time. And the other thing they'd said is that the advice a psychologist wouldn't give you is avoidance. So the thing that makes anxiety worse and panic attacks worse is avoidance. So I went to a psychologist about panic attacks probably 10 years ago, and we did exposure therapy. That's part of CBT. And they gradually, I'm not sure a psychologist, if you were in this level of distress, they'd be like, go and do it again tomorrow. They'd help you and be a bit gentler. But it exacerbates anxiety to avoid it. And so I would hazard a guess that if Carrie Bickmore wasn't reading the news, if she was doing something else, those panic attacks still might present themselves. I think the reason that these stories go viral is because one thing that people get very self-conscious about is how they appear, because you feel like when you're in the midst of a panic attack, you actually, I thought I'd had one. I once called an ambulance because I thought that I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. You think everyone can see your head exploding, and it is mortifying and shameful, and it's this dread, you're so certain that you're dying in that moment, that to actually see or hear someone else go through a panic attack sort of demystifies it, and you go, oh, the world kept spinning. The sun rose the next day. It wasn't the end of the world.
And from the outside, if he hadn't have walked off, you wouldn't have known if he hadn't have said it.
No.
It's interesting. When I've had panic attacks, I don't feel like I'm dying, but I feel such a level of terror that I can't even speak it. I can't even tell anyone. I would never have been able to say what Nate did, or in Carrie's case, tell a friend or a coworker, because it's really hard to explain. But you're right, Jessie, in terms of I used to have panic attacks whenever I flew, and I could have decided to not fly, and I did minimise the amount of travel that I did for a really long time. And then I realised my life was getting smaller because anxiety will just attach itself to something else. And it did. Once I got over my fear of flying, my anxiety attached itself to a different fear. I think that what's so amazing about Nate doing this, and also a shout out to Lisa Miller for the way she was able to handle that. And I remember this is not the first time that's happened to her. This also happened when she was hosting, and live TV is so hard. She had a guest who was menopausal. She had a hot flush and she suddenly couldn't speak. And Lisa was also in the position there to just carry that through and give that person complete dignity and make it feel really normal. And that is an incredible art and an incredible skill. But I think Carrie back then wouldn't have seen anyone. No one spoke about anxiety. When I was having my panic attacks, it was in the earlier days of Mamamia, and I didn't want to tell anyone or write about it because I thought it would mean people would think I was crazy and people wouldn't take me seriously. The generosity of being public about something like that is huge.
The other
really
thing
is.
I thought was of note about what they both said, the more you listened, and I urge people to read Nate Byrne's article, it's really insightful. But the thing that almost scared them, continued to scare them more than the stimulus, was the possibility of having a panic attack again.
Yes.
So that's actually what the...
Yeah, and then you're panicking about that.
Yeah. So then when you get any of the symptoms, like Nate, the first time he had it, interestingly, he was running late and he kind of had to run. And if you've had panic attacks and you feel out of breath, that can freak you out because you go, oh, no, I'm not. Tell me I'm not having a panic. And then you start to spiral, and then the physiological sensations of panic start to trigger the brain, and then that's when it happens.
It's also not possible to avoid everything that might trigger you. So, for example, I have panic attacks when I have ultrasounds or any sort of scan because of a bad experience and a bad result that I got many, many years ago. I didn't even realise that's why I would have them. Like, it took my mum to sort of say, darling, I think it's because that time you had the ultrasound and you lost the baby. Like, I think that's what, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah. Like, I had to almost sedate myself. But you can't not have a mammogram. You can't not have an ultrasound if you need one. So that's why also avoidance just isn't possible and it isn't helpful.
I find all that, of course, absolutely enlightening and correct. The only thing I would say is that for some people, work stress does really add to their anxiety. And there is no shame in saying, I can't do this. And I'm not suggesting for even a split second that that's what Nate or Carrie or anyone should, not even for a second. But I mean, because panic attacks are kind of a bit different, right?
Yeah.
But for lots of people who find themselves teetering on the edge of, I mean, breakdown's a tough word, but, you know, when I did that interview with Julie Goodwin and she was talking about how she felt she couldn't get off this professional flywheel that she was on of all this work that she had to do to keep everything going all the time. But she was inside just completely in the grips of a terrible mental health crisis. And she said to her psychiatrist, but I can't stop. And she was like, why? And she's like, because of the money, because of the mortgage, because of this is what I do. And her psychiatrist was like, you know, funerals cost a lot of money too, you know, like, which seems like a very simplistic, extreme thing to say. But my point is just, while I don't mean in any way to attach that to this conversation, there is no shame or stigma in not being able to carry on if you are struggling.
No, that's really true.
Is Australia about to ban gambling ads? And if so, could that mark the end of free-to-air television? Are gambling ads keeping Australian sport afloat? And does complete prohibition work anyway? Let's start at the beginning. An alliance of leading Australians has demanded the government totally ban gambling ads. Gambling losses in Australia, I didn't know this, are among the highest per person in the world. They cost us an estimated $25 billion a year. Among the signatories of this alliance that was put to the government was former PM John Howard, who said many Australians are alarmed about the proliferation of gambling advertising on our screens, which I think we can all agree is a fair statement. Labor MP Mike Freelander said a total advertising ban was a necessary health policy akin to controls on tobacco advertising, adding that gambling is a way of transferring billions of dollars from poor people to wealthy people.
Yes.
Here's what Independent Senator David Pocock said this week.
It's a betrayal of Australians. 80% of Australians want this, and we have a government that doesn't have the guts to actually stand up to the gambling industry, doesn't have the imagination to actually work with TV. Like, where is the courage from this Labor government? Young men who have committed suicide because of the hole that they have got themselves into with gambling addictions.
And Jackie Lambie said this.
Just for once today, just for once, put the future of our kids first. put the future of our kids first. I am begging you.
Yay, Jackie. That I just endorse everything that she says and the emotion in her voice. Abso-friggin-lutely.
I love what she can get through in 9 seconds. She's like, I only need 9 seconds to get my point across.
It was pretty compelling watching that.
Doesn't mess around.
No.
But is it really that simple? Because on Q&A on Monday night, Bill Shorten said that free-to-air television needs the money from gambling ads to stay afloat.
We should do a GoFundMe for free-to-air television because, you know, they're not making enough money.
But you know
from
what, Maya?
Poor Australians who are having billions of dollars funneled into gambling companies.
But they hire a lot of Australians. A lot of people have jobs in these industries. And if free-to-air was to go down the toilet, a lot of people would lose their jobs.
And also when we say free-to-air, they also mean streaming. Like I watch a lot of streaming TV and there is a gambling ad every 2 seconds.
To be clear, if your business is held up by gambling advertising, you need to relook at your business model. Take some hard decisions. We don't accept gambling advertising at Mamamia. Would we be more profitable if we did? Hell yes.
Yes, but...
Could we hire more people? Hell yes.
Yes, but Mamamia is targeted at women. A lot of gambling advertising, if not all of it, is really appealing to men.
And young men very
young
often.
men, right? So if I'm making my money off young men and a gambling company is going, I'm going to give you all of this money, which is a year's worth of revenue, it's a hard thing to say no to.
Do you know what else you make a lot of money from, or you used to? Tobacco advertising.
Yeah.
This is the most common comparison and it's a very good one because gambling is addictive. Gambling is, as you said, Jessie, costing a lot of people and a lot of young men who can't afford it, and not only young men, but a lot of young men an enormous amount of money. They are advertising in a way that's very attractive to attract a new recruit to this addiction. You can do it on your phone. You can do it in private. It's a very good comparison.
Do it with your mates. It's part of mateship.
It's very good comparison to tobacco advertising. One of the issues is, though, and I guess this is one of the arguments they'd say, is that Australians spend so much money on gambling. Like they spend billions and billions and billions of dollars.
So under Labor's proposal, gambling ads would be banned online in kids' programming. That seems like
sensible.
An obvious one.
Define kid.
Well, yeah, because the problem with kids advertising is I see lots of gambling ads on family TV.
Okay,
so it wouldn't fall into like kids advertising, but let's say
Lego Masters,
Survivor, Lego Masters,
right.
The Summit, like stuff that I watch with the kids, and sport, which we all watch with our kids.
So it would be during live sports broadcasting. Let's say you're sitting down, you're watching the NRL or the AFL. Live sports broadcasting in an hour either side. They're saying no gambling ads, but it can still appear during TV programming. But a lot of people are going, hang on.
What does that mean?
It means that at another time, let's say at 10 p.m, that you can put your gambling ads there. It'll keep it afloat. You can still show the sport, but we're not showing them together because kids are watching the sport. There's, of course, the other issue, which is maybe there's not gambling ads, but I turn on and I want to watch the Manly Sea Eagles. They've got PointsBet written on their jerseys, right?
Sponsorship.
And you've also got PointsBet Stadium, which is where the Cronulla Sharks play.
So what does that tell you? If they're advertising on these programs and they're advertising on the players, it tells you that it works. It tells you that by doing that, more people spend more money with these companies and more Australians are put into financial hardship, often with tragic consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you. And I think
we all are.
And I think that with
you're very angry, but it's like me and Jessie are like, okay.
I am very angry because I'm also a media owner. So this idea of we have to make hard decisions all the time about the advertising that we accept or don't accept. And to just say, well, our business depends on it, I don't think that's good enough.
These were the exact arguments that were made about tobacco. And you know what? If free-to-air is dying, then maybe we just bring back the tobacco ads. If
exactly.
We need them so
and these
badly.
media companies have all these lobbyists in Canberra talking to Bill Shorten, talking to all these people saying, oh, no, it'll mean so many jobs. Well, what does it mean if it doesn't happen? What does it mean if we don't ban these ads?
Although I agree with you, and I do genuinely agree with you, it infuriates me how, like, my kids can literally parrot all the words to all the gambling ads. And that is scary.
So can mine, and I don't even know where they see them clearly on
subliminal, you know, it's going in. I guess if I was putting a devil's advocate argument on it, I'd say with that number of Aussies spending that much money on it all the time, they clearly love it. There's a portion of the population who have problem and addiction.
Do you know what else people love?
Yeah. Okay, let me finish my sentence.
Tobacco.
Cigarettes and alcohol and social media, right? There are lots of things that prop up our economies that are bad for people. So it's like, the debate that's going on at the moment all over the world about what kind of restrictions we should be putting on social media and phone use for young people, because that's also very damaging for their mental health. So it's like there are all kinds of pockets of our global economy that are held up by things that are basically damaging, and this is one of them. And I agree wholeheartedly that it needs to be very strictly regulated. But I guess one of the arguments is, I'm an adult, I choose what I do with my money, blah-de-blah-de-blah. They do still let alcohol advertise around sport, not cigarettes, but alcohol. And that's interesting too, because there's an enormous portion of the population who have massive problems with alcohol addiction. The counter-argument, and again, it's not mine, is, are we just going to impede everybody's choices and treat everybody like a child rather than let them make their own calls? I guess that would probably be a generous read.
Yeah, what do you think about alcohol advertising during sport, especially given the, say, spike, grand finals, state of origin, spike in domestic violence because men come home having drunk too much alcohol? Like, what do you think about that?
I think that there are responsible ways to drink.
The sport thing is fascinating because in England they have banned the shirts and the gambling companies from being directly involved in the sport, and the world hasn't ended, and the Premier League still makes a lot of money, and they still sell the broadcasting rights for bajillions of dollars. So, it is a bit, as you say, Mia, it's a bit of a furphy that everything will end. And it is insidious that if you watch a sporting game, someone will kick a goal, we cut straight to a gambling ad, then we cut to another bit that looks like commentary, but actually it's brought to you by a gambling ad branded content. It is insidious.
I've heard lobbyists say you can give them a few years to kind of make some plans about changing their advertising model or whatever. It's not going to be like a click of the fingers, and that seems fair enough. But on this, because I've been thinking a lot about ethics and sport and who funds it, especially in light of the Olympics, which we've said, brought everyone together. And you might have noticed during the swimming, when Australia won so many gold medals, especially Australian female athletes, they would go to the stands and there was a smiling Gina Rinehart. Gina Rinehart is, of course, the executive chairwoman of Hancock Prospecting. She's made her money in mining, which is ethically fraught. But the commentators couldn't say a thing about Gina Rinehart at the swimming because she has funded Australian swimming for years. Basically, even Kate Campbell has come out and said she saved Australian swimming.
Hi, Mrs. Rinehart. It's Kate Campbell here. Thank you so much for your support of this wonderful team. You have been our number one cheerleader every stroke of the way.
They've all said that they wouldn't be as successful without her financial and emotional support. She donates directly to the swimmers, basically meaning that they don't have to work other jobs. They can train really, really hard throughout the years and get these record gold medals. How do we feel about that? Because the swimmers they know how it works. They know it's an exchange. So even after they won all their gold medals, there was a cruise. Gina took them on a cruise and they all said, thank you, Gina.
It's really interesting because you can see this conflict in some of the athletes, in particular the younger ones, in this genuflecting to Gina.
To your benefactor.
But also,
your patron.
Yes, to your patron, yes. Yeah. Which is it's as old as time, right? Wealthy people subsidising art, subsidising sports, subsidising events, and then your job is to just not say anything mean about them. It just gets harder with Gina because one of the interesting things about why does Gina do this, she's got a lot of money and, I'm sure it's fun to decide what you want to do with it, is there has to be a level here where it's in exchange for something.
Yeah.
And it seems to be in exchange for influence, cultural influence. Correct. Because we know how Australia feels about the swimming, particularly every 4 years. And in fact, there will be a very strong argument being mounted right now that Australia's best ever Olympic results are a direct result of Gina. There has been a report, I read this investigation in the Herald that was sort of trying to uncover what some of this influence might look like. And she famously had a big falling out with Swimming Australia a few years ago and withdrew funding like from that organisation, but carried on a partnership with Swimming Queensland. And as you said, Jessie, going directly to the swimmers instead. They seem to have been patching that up because I think they had to. But for example, at that time, there were reports that Hancock Prospecting were asking for things like, could Swimming Australia not support Pride Month in a public way? Could they take the acknowledgement of country off their website and off their Instagram posts and things like that?
Oh, wow.
And then we talked about this. I can't remember if we talked.
Did they do all
Well,
those
I'm
things?
not sure that they did because I'm not sure if it was that direct. When the Herald asked Hancock Prospecting directly, is it true that you asked for those? The statements that came back were like, Hancock Prospecting doesn't believe that politics has any place in sport. So they didn't say yes or no. They just said, this is our thing, right? And it's like when there was that furore, is that how I say it? Furore around the Gina Rinehart portrait in the National Gallery. We went into this on the show, so I won't go into it in big detail. But
she didn't like it. She didn't like it. She didn't look good.
And an email was sent out to all her swimmers, all the swimmers that said, athletes, it has come to our attention that there are some portraits of Mrs. Rinehart displayed in both the National and South Australian art galleries that she, rightly so, in brackets, finds offensive and insulting. I've attached them here so you can see them. We will be reaching out to the CEO of the galleries to express our concerns with the pieces that they do not represent the image or the reputation that is deserved as the patron of our sport. To assist in the message, it would be great to put weight behind it as a collective group, given that you are athletes that she loves and supports so generously. They said it wasn't compulsory, but it would be appreciated. And swimmers like Kyle Chalmers did. They came out publicly and said, I think she deserves to be praised. And I think these portraits are unfair. And without her sponsorship, we'd have nothing. So then she has these big galas at her mansion when the swimmers all come up and get awards from her. She gives them MacBooks and treats, and they all have to say nice things. Like Ariane Titmus went up and said, I wouldn't have anything without you. So it's influence on a big part of Australian culture. And is there a problem with that or not, Mia?
Well, yeah. I mean, in the same way that the gambling companies have influence in commercial television. And if you're a big advertiser, depending on the media organisation, but why do you think the media companies are lobbying politicians to block this bill, to block any legislation that could turn the tap off? So it is really insidious. And I think that you don't even realise it. Like the stuff that you were just saying about we don't want Swimming Australia to participate in Pride Month. That is really one person's view. She's buying cultural influence, quite literally.
I've been thinking a lot. I was speaking to a friend over the weekend about imagining the last 3 years where the swimmers get pulled into private meetings and it's like, repeat after me, we love Gina.
Yes.
We can't say anything bad about Gina. And someone's like, I just want to do my backstroke.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into all of this mess.
And we know what happened when she tried to sponsor the diamonds. And Netball Australia wanted to take the money because they really needed it. The sport was in difficult financial straits. And the players were like, we're not comfortable with this person whose father had said that Aboriginal people should be sterilised. Yeah. We're uncomfortable with wearing his name, Hancock Prospecting, on our outfits, whatever they're called, sporting uniforms, while we play. So she withdrew the money.
Yeah,
because she wouldn't disavow those comments.
I wonder how we'd feel about our athletes, turning up to the opening ceremony with Hancock Prospecting like emblazoned on their front or whatever. And I in these situations, either way, I actually feel for the athletes because the athletes, even the rugby league player with PointsBet on his shirt, he just wants to go and play the sport he loves and he wants to get paid for it so that he can do it full time. And the kind of complicated high level stuff, I just think it's ethically fraught, but it is really, really complicated. I acknowledge that.
Want unlimited Out Loud access? We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday exclusively for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get us in your ears 5 days a week. And a huge thank you to all our current subscribers.
You may heard or seen something about doing a dopamine detox, it's become a bit of a viral wellness trend in the last little while. And so we wanted to unpack what it involves and who needs one. First of all, what is dopamine? It is the brain's own reward system. So if you think of it as the brain's way of saying, hey, that felt good, let's do it again. And it's the neurotransmitter that's responsible for feelings of pleasure and reward and motivation, whether it's biting into your favourite dessert or achieving a personal goal. Dopamine is there cheering you on and keeping you coming back for more. So having the activities that give you this dopamine hit as part of your lifestyle allows dopamine to be released through your brain's reward system. And so as a result, the pleasure will lift your mood and it will make you feel more motivated and focused and less stressed. And dopamine can even act as a bit of a pain reliever. So the obvious question is why we'd choose to detox from feelings of pleasure. That sounds very Puritan. Well, the problem with dopamine-inducing activities is that we come to rely on them too much, talking about addiction. They can leave us craving more and more and more, and it's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it, according to clinical psychologists. They say that excessive engagement in sort of activities that give you a dopamine hit, especially when they involve instant gratification, can prompt overstimulation of your dopamine system, and that can lead to addictive behaviours and negative consequences. And they also say that when you become overly reliant on dopamine-inducing activities, gambling is a really good example, it can dull our sensitivity to pleasure. So they say that, if you look at things like porn or gambling, to use extremes, the high that you get can mean that you're constantly chasing a higher and higher high, and so-called normal pleasures just don't give you that hit of dopamine. So a dopamine detox means that you fast from dopamine-producing activities or anything that gives you pleasure. It sounds horrendous. And the idea of it is that you decrease reward sensitivity. Although it's important to say there's no scientific evidence to support the concept of a dopamine detox. It's really just kind of an internet thing that people are talking about. So, for example, we spoke on the show a little while ago about raw dogging on flights. So our phones are probably the biggest hit of dopamine that we get, everyone gets, whether you're checking things, scrolling, all the different ways that our phone relies on us being addicted by giving us those little hits of dopamine that we're constantly looking for, which is why we end up doom scrolling, because we're scrolling and scrolling, looking for the hit and thinking, I'll just stay a bit longer in case I get that hit because I need more. If you do a dopamine detox and you're trying to, for example, limit your screen time, which is one way of doing it, the typical time frame is doing it for 2 to 4 weeks, says a doctor who was quoted in an article about this. He says that you might feel irritable and moody during the first week or two as you reduce your engagement with the feel-good activities. Jessie, do you need a dopamine detox?
I wouldn't have called it this, but I do this all the time because I'm very aware of it. Rather than dopamine, the way I think about it is like overstimulation or over-arousal. In order to feel stimulated, if I am on my couch and I go, all right, in order for me not to feel bored, I have to have my phone, my laptop, my TV on and music going and also half reading a book. That's a problem, and I don't think that's good for me or my brain or the way I live my life. So I will consciously go, all right, we're taking down the arousal so that I can do the things that, because then of course when I get into bed and open my book, of course that's not going to stimulate me because where's the dopamine
100%.
hit?
Or sit on the floor to read a book with your child.
Yeah. And that's parenting, I think, is a good example because parenting a child for a day is a dopamine detox. Because even at work, right, you've got the Slack messages and you've got your cup of coffee or like all the little things that kind of keep you going, the almost little treat culture of it.
For it to sorry, I'm just trying to understand. For it to qualify as dopamine, do you have to like it? Or is it just that you're addicted to it? Because say I'm as guilty as this as everybody, constantly looking at my phone, but it also makes me feel really overwhelmed. Like when my Slack messages are going bing, bing, bing and my text messages, and I do it all the time, but it's not like I go, oh, goody. Like every time my phone bings, I generally go like, oh.
But you're still getting a dopamine hit because it's
making
stimulation.
You focus, and it's holding your attention. Yeah. And you're right. When you're getting really overwhelmed, it means that you've got too much of it.
And I remember I used to tutor kids and, try to get them to write an essay. And they would be sitting in their room and they'd go, yeah, I've been trying to write my essay. And they'd have music on, they'd have a stress ball, all these different points, often phone, laptop, 11 tabs open. And I was like, well, you're not going to be able to write your essay like that because this is all antithetical to focus. Because you're getting dopamine from so many different points of stimulus that it's going to be way too boring for you to do anything. And this is where the issue actually comes, is anything that's purposeful or meaningful or goal-oriented you can't achieve because dopamine's getting in the way. Because there are 10 things that are going to make you feel better than doing the essay right now. But you should do the essay right now because it's better for the long term. So it's also about hedonism, I think.
It's about the attention economy and how the digital world has made all of us addicted to dopamine because everything about it rewards instant gratification. It's built on instant gratification. And the things that you talk about, reading a book, doing an assignment, there's no instant gratification. They're just a hard slog, and there's not a lot of dopamine in the short term involved. I'll give you some examples of low stimulus or low dopamine activities. Examples include meditation, gentle exercise, reading in moderation. That's exactly how I don't know how to read. I only know how to read hard and fast. Spending time in nature, all the things I hate. Engaging in these activities during your detox helps maintain a calmer and more focused state of mind, they say.
No, it doesn't.
You know what else, Mia? You know what else most of those tasks don't have, attention, instant gratification aside, is you don't have to pay for them. So this is also about consumerism. This is about the attention economy, yes, but it's also about what you can buy. Because if we're all one purchase away from happiness, which is what capitalism sells us, that if we just buy that one more thing, we're going to be happy, then we're constantly on this flywheel of just next, next, next. But the things that you named, it's like there's this difference between dopamine and happiness.
Do you like doing those things?
Love doing those things.
I also ADHD affects this, right, Mia? So don't sit there feeling like in any way bad that you're like, I don't like that stuff. There must be something wrong with me. You know that that's not true. That's not true. And we talked about this on one of our subs episodes last week, and then I talked about it on Friday a bit. The thing I worry about this is putting moral value almost on the things that bring you pleasure. Because one of the things that I've really come to understand about judging this kind of stuff is, the scenario that you explained at the beginning of this, Jessie, where you're on your couch with your book and your TV and your phone and I kind of do that to myself, but then I begin to feel a bit sick, and so I have to stop
almost
it.
Claustrophobic,
right?
yeah.
That's not how it makes you feel, is it? You've explained this to me lots of times, and so have other people, that that makes you feel calmer.
Yeah, soother.
So
it's soothing and I'm able to focus better.
So for me to sit there and say to you, you know what you should do, Mia? You should turn everything off and go for a walk in the park. That isn't necessary. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But I don't think that is going to make you feel better. And feeling like you should be doing that is making you feel worse, right?
I feel very anxious.
Exactly. The language of detox, which is borrowed obviously from all addictive stuff, and we'd say that giving up alcohol when you've got an issue with it is incredibly difficult and challenging, and you have to push through it to get to a good place. God, maybe not even a good place, a stable, steady place. Are we saying, by using the word detox in this context, are we saying that Mia has to close all her tabs and go and sit in a park, even if that makes her really anxious and unhappy because eventually she's going to see the light? That's not how your brain works, right? See the light.
I think the interesting thing about what you just said is about how you two actually like those things. So those low dopamine activities, your baseline is that you enjoy them. I've always detested them. And I have always felt that it's a moral failing.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, go outside and touch grass and, go for a walk on the beach and try meditation. Learning that I had ADHD and learning what ADHD is, it's essentially a dysfunctional reward system.
And it's about dopamine, right?
100%. So it's a completely dysfunctional dopamine reward system. Because we don't naturally produce enough of it, we have to look for it externally. It might be taking risks. It might be jumping around. It might be fidget spinners. We need more stimulation than the average bear. It's either we don't produce it enough naturally or we don't use it sufficiently. So what ADHD medication does is that it artificially gives you dopamine, which helps you concentrate, right? So if you even look at caffeine in someone who doesn't have ADHD is a stimulant. Caffeine for someone who does have ADHD is a stimulant, but it also helps you focus. And that's a big difference.
What I've always found strange about you is that
so many things.
The show can't go on all day.
So true.
Is that even though you're addicted to dopamine and you wear your bright colours and you've got your fidgets and you've got your phone, you still get the big things done. And to me, that's why I hate the distractions, because I feel like they're going to stop me from getting the big things done. But you're able to use the adrenaline. The whole thing about the reason why we would detox off dopamine is of what we're missing out on. But I'm not sure you're missing out on anything.
But that's
Jessie,
the thing. That's why it can't be one size fits all.
Yeah. No, but I am, because my biggest dopamine hit is work. So when you say I get the big things done, I get the work big things done, also because I don't have a choice because I co-own the business, but I get the work things done. I've got an enormous tank for work. It gives me a dopamine hit. Now, there are a lot of people who work in jobs where they get no dopamine out of their job at all. It doesn't mean I love every minute of it, but I find it very energizing and it's interesting to me. What I don't get done are a lot of the things that I really need to get done, like registering my car or cooking dinner, that I just can't get done because there's never been any dopamine in it for me. So I think the way to know if you should do a dopamine detox or not, like anything, is your life unmanageable? Like, is it difficult? And when you both talk about how you feel when it's just a bit much, and then you do need to get back to that baseline
that's when my life becomes unmanageable,
going
is
for
when
a
I'm
walk
overwhelmed.
gives you something rather than, going for a walk just doesn't give me anything and I don't have time. You might need to recalibrate your levels of dopamine. But when you have ADHD, your whole life, your every waking minute is about trying to manage your dopamine levels in a way that's constructive, not destructive.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Outlouders will put in our newsletter this week some links to a few articles about this because, as always, I mean, I know we're not saying you should detox from anything like medical, but never do anything extreme or any wellness trend that you see on the internet without really looking into it, because it just might not be for you.
Will Taylor formally endorse Kamala Harris, or has she already?
When you say Taylor, you mean?
She only needs a first name as opposed to the potential future president of the United States. Or has she already? In yesterday's subscriber episode, we unpacked all the latest from the US election. We want to know if you're interested in this, because we could talk about the US election all day. A lot has happened. Trump is losing his mind a little bit.
Oh my God,
we
it's
had
so
to
great.
Actually fun.
I so love that you guys are on this train and that I'm back on it. So subscribers, we know that the US politics isn't for everyone. So we tried making it a subscriber episode this week. Gosh, we had a good time. We'll put a link in the show notes if you want to have a listen.
Yes, go and listen. If you like it, tell us. We want to know. A massive thank you to all of you Outlouders for listening to our show today, and every time you do it, we really appreciate it. And of course, to our fabulous team for putting it together. We're going to be back in your ears tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There's a link in the episode description.